Hi, welcome back to Cakes Brief's LSAT class. My name is Sean Murphy. Today is lesson 8. We're going to talk about grouping games. Grouping games are a much more diverse category of game than are the basic sequencing games. We have games with one group, games with two groups, games with three groups, some games where all the characters will be used, some games where they will not all be used, some grouping games where characters can go more than once. We're also going to be doing a lot more sufficient necessary diagramming and grouping games than we were doing in the other kinds of games. So this is a good chance to review some of your sufficient necessary diagramming skills. Let's jump right into a game from June 2008. The game section is section 3, and we're going to look at the first game. So there's a dance, and there's some men and some women. The men are Felipe, Grant, and Hassan. And the women, Jacqueline, Lorena, and Kiko. At no time during the dance will anyone other than the dancers be on stage. Who's on stage and who's off stage is determined by the following constraints. So some of these dancers are on stage, some of them are off. Some are in the game or in the group, and some are out of the group. So there aren't really two groups here. There's just who's on stage and who's off stage. So there's different rules about those different kinds of categories. This game is often referred to as an in-out game because some of the characters are in the group, some are out. First rule: if Jacqueline is on stage, Lorena is off stage. So if J, no L. We always write out our contrapositives. Remember, when we do the contrapositive, the negation stays on the same side when there's one negation. So if L, no J. L and J can never be together on the stage. They could be together off of the stage. If we just look at this rule alone, the two necessary conditions, if we have a rule and it's contrapositive right under it, these two conditions can coexist. So because it's an on-off or in-out game, if Lorena is off the stage, then Jacqueline could be as well, according to just this rule. So whenever you have a rule that says one character kicks out another character, I like to call this a restraining order rule since they can't be in the same place. That doesn't mean that they cannot both be absent. If we had a party and Albert and Betty just broke up and we can't invite both of them, we could invite neither of them. In fact, that might be a good idea just to avoid drama altogether. So we can't have both, but we could have neither in this particular kind of rule. Now the next rule says if Lorena is off, Jacqueline's on. And the contrapositive, if Jacqueline's off, Lorena is on. Now this might look similar, but it's actually a very different kind of rule. Here we learn that if Lorena is off the stage, Jacqueline must be there. If Jacqueline's off the stage, Lorena must be there. If one of them's missing, the other one must be on the stage. So this is telling us that I always have to have one or the other. If one's missing, the other one's definitely there. It's very different from this rule that says that they can't both be together. Now, if we look at just the second rule on its own, I have the possibility of both J and L being on the stage. When you have the sufficient condition negated, that means that if one character is missing, the other is present. You either have J or L, as I've said before, or implies the possibility of both. So this rule on its own, this either-or rule, tells us that I need a J or an L, and I could have both. Now, of course, we should be thinking about the entire game. So together, this means that on the stage, I always have a J or an L, and off the stage, I always have an L or a J. If J's there, L's off. If L's there, J is off, but I have to have one of them. The next rule, if Felipe is off, Jacqueline is also off. So if Jacqueline is on, Felipe is on. This is just a regular dependent rule. Jacqueline needs Felipe for whatever reason, but Felipe could be there without Jacqueline. He doesn't need her to be on the stage, but if she's on the stage, Felipe definitely is. The last rule, if any of the women are on the stage, Grant is also on the stage. So if I have J or L or K, I have to have Grant. If Grant's not there, I'm missing J, and I'm missing L, and I'm missing K. I have neither J nor L nor K. Not J and not L and not K. Remember, the or becomes and when doing a contrapositive. Now, some of you might have already made this deduction that Grant is always going to be on the stage, because I always have a J or an L. I always have at least one of the women on the stage. So there's always a Grant. This in and out game is a little bit simpler than some of the more famous in-out games that we've seen in the past. And in your notes, I've referenced those past games if you want to take a look at some older LSATs for some more complicated in-out games where you actually draw a much larger chain. But the principle is the same, that the out group, or in this case the off group, it's where the negations are. It's not really the same, it's not a distinct group, it's just like an anti-group. So in another game, we might have an either-or rule like this with two characters that are not in a restraining order rule. In that kind of game, they could be together in the in group. They can't be together in the out group because they can't both be missing. So what we could do is actually create two scenarios. One where Jacqueline's on the stage and L is out. Another where Lorraine is on the stage and Jacqueline is out. So if we have J, we can't have L, and we have to have an F and a G. And then I don't know about Kiko and Hassan. So that would be one scenario. In another scenario, I've got Lorena. I don't have Jacqueline. I must have Grant. Now Felipe could still be on the stage because Felipe doesn't need Jacqueline. That would be a bad reversal, a half contrapositive, to think that if Jacqueline's out, Felipe must be out. So I don't know about K, H, or Felipe here. Hassan is a completely random character. There's no rules about him. So we could say next to Hassan, RAN for random, because he doesn't have any rules about him. He's the freest dancer among these dancers. But every one of my proper hypotheticals is going to be in one of these two scenarios. Let's take a look at these questions. Question 1, typically we have a list question, and that's what we have here. Which one of the following is a list of all the dancers who could be on stage at a particular time? Now we made the deduction that there's always Grant, but Grant can't be alone because we always need a J or an L, so A is out. B has no Grant, B is out. C has Grant, Hassan, and Lorena, and that could certainly work in the second scenario. We could add Hassan. Hassan, remember, is a random character, so C can work. C is the correct answer. D looks close, but remember, Jacqueline down here needs Felipe, so there should be a Felipe for D to be correct. Without Felipe, it's wrong. And E has both Jacqueline and Lorena, so E is also incorrect. We're stuck with answer choice C. 2, which one of the following cannot be true at any time during the dance? Felipe and Grant are the only men on stage. Well, that could happen up here, where I just have Felipe and Grant. I don't have Hassan. B, Grant and Hassan are the only men on stage. That can happen down here. If I could add a Hassan, it would just be Hassan and Grant for the guys. C, Jacqueline is the only woman on stage. That could be true up here. I don't need Kiko. She could be in the off group, so Jacqueline would be the only woman. And D, Kiko is the only woman on stage. That can't be true because I always need a J or an L because of this either or rule. So D is correct, and E could be true, so in this case it's incorrect. 3, which one of the following is a complete and accurate list of the dancers, any one of whom could be off stage when Jacqueline is on stage? So whenever they use that phrase, any one of whom, or any one of which, that means all the characters who could be off stage, not just in one particular scenario, but every character who can possibly be off. So when Jacqueline's on, I have to have a Felipe and I have to have a Grant. I also need offset. Well, in this answer choice, I know that L has to be off. So L is definitely going to be in the right answer. That kicks out D right away. I also know that K and H could be off. They don't need to be on stage, so they also must be in my correct answer. The correct answer is E. Number 4, if there are more women than men on stage, exactly how many dancers must be on stage? Well, we can't have all 3 women because J and L kick each other out. So the maximum number of women I can have is 2. If there's more women than men, that means there's 1 man. That means there's 3 total dancers on stage. Correct answer for number 4 is C. 5, what is the minimum number of dancers that must be on the stage at any given time? Well, it looks like I have to have 3 if I ever have a Jacqueline, but I could have just 2. I could have Lorena and Grant, and everyone else is off. I need a J or an L. But if I have an L, I don't need anything else except for the Grant, because Grant's there all the time, because there's always at least 1 woman on stage. So I could have a minimum of 2. The correct answer for number 5 is C, and that's our first logic game.